So speaking of Meta, Yann LeCun is somebody who funded Perplexity. What do you think about Yann? He's been feisty his whole life, but he's been especially on fire recently on Twitter, on X.
I have a lot of respect for him. I think he went through many years where people just ridiculed or didn't respect his work as much as they should have, and he still stuck with it. And like, not just his contributions to connets and self-supervised learning and energy-based models and things like that. He also educated like a good generation of next scientists, like Korai, who's now the CTO of DeepMind, was a student. The guy who invented Dolly at OpenAI and Sora was Yann LeCun's student, Aditya Ramesh, and many others like who've done great work in this field come from LeCun's lab, and like Wojciech Zaremba, one of the OpenAI co-founders. So there's like a lot of people he's just given as the next generation too that have gone on to do great work, and I would say that his positioning on, like, I mean, he was right about one thing very early on in 2016. You probably remember RL was the real hot shit at the time. Like, everyone wanted to do RL, and it was not an easy to gain skill. You have to actually go and like read MDPs, understand like read some math, Bellman equations, dynamic programming, model-based, model fit. It's just like a lot of terms, policy gradients. It goes over your head at some point. It's not that easily accessible, but everyone thought that was the future, and that would lead us to AGI in like the next few years. And this guy went on the stage in Europe's the premier AI conference and said, RL is just the cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
And bulk of the intelligence is in the cake, and supervised learning is the icing on the cake. And the bulk of the cake is unsupervised.
Unsupervised, he called it at the time, which turned out to be, I guess, self-supervised, whatever.
Yeah. That is literally the recipe for ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like, you're spending bulk of the compute in pre-training, predicting the next token, which is or self-supervised, whatever you want to call it. The icing is the supervised fine-tuning step, instruction following, and the cherry on the cake, RLHF, which is what gives the conversational abilities.
That's fascinating. Did he at that time, I'm trying to remember, did he have inklings about what unsupervised learning?
I think he was more into energy-based models at the time. And there's, you can say some amount of energy-based model reasoning is there in like RLHF, but
the basic intuition,
yeah,
right.
I mean, he was wrong on the betting on GANs as the go-to idea, which turned out to be wrong, and like autoregressive models and diffusion models ended up winning. But the core insight that RL is like not the real deal. Most of the compute should be spent on learning just from raw data was super right and controversial at the time.
Yeah, and he wasn't apologetic about it.
Yeah, and now he's saying something else, which is he's saying autoregressive models might be a dead end.
Yeah, which is also super controversial.
Yeah, and there is some element of truth to that, in the sense he's not saying it's going to go away, but he's just saying like there is another layer in which you might want to do reasoning, not in the raw input space, but in some latent space that compresses images, text, audio, everything, like all sensory modalities, and applies some kind of continuous gradient-based reasoning. And then you can decode it into whatever you want in the raw input space using autoregressive or diffusion, doesn't matter. And I think that could also be powerful.
It might not be JEPA, it might be some other methodology.
Yeah, I don't think it's JEPA.
Yeah.
But I think what he's saying is probably right. Like, you could be a lot more efficient if you do reasoning in a much more abstract representation.
And he's also pushing the idea that the only, maybe it's an indirect implication, but the way to keep AI safe, like the solution to AI safety, is open source, which is another controversial idea. It's like really kind of, really saying open source is not just good, it's good on every front, and it's the only way forward.
I kind of agree with that, because if something is dangerous, if you are actually claiming something is dangerous, wouldn't you want more eyeballs on it versus fewer?
I mean, there's a lot of arguments both directions, because people who are afraid of AGI, they're worried about it being a fundamentally different kind of technology because of how rapidly it can become good. And so the eyeballs if you have a lot of eyeballs on it, some of those eyeballs will belong to people who are malevolent and can quickly do harm, or try to harness that power to abuse others, like on a mass scale. So, but history is laden with people worrying about this new technology is fundamentally different than every other technology that ever came before it.
Right.
So, I tend to trust the intuitions of engineers who are closest to the metal,
Right.
who are building the systems.
Right.
But also those engineers can often be blind to the big picture impact of a technology. So you gotta listen to both.
Yeah.
But open source, at least at this time, seems while it has risks, seems like the best way forward because it maximizes transparency and gets the most minds, like you said.
I mean, you can
involved.
identify more ways the systems can be misused faster
Mhm.
and build the right guardrails against it too.
Because that is a super exciting technical problem, and all the nerds would love to kind of explore that problem of finding the ways this thing goes wrong and how to defend against it.
Mhm.
Not everybody is excited about improving capability of the system.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are like
Poking at the models, seeing what they can do and how it can be misused, how it can be like prompted in ways where, despite the guardrails, you can jailbreak it.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have discovered all this if some of the models were not open source. And also, like, how to build the right guardrails. There are academics that might come up with breakthroughs because they have access to weights, and like that can benefit all the frontier models too.